AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Our host, Bar Kelly, brings you the leading minds in AI, sharing their story, their success, and their advice. Focusing on fast-tracking you to the top, AI in Action cuts through the hype to help you kickstart your data science career. To listen to the latest AI in Action podcast, head over to www.alldus.com/podcast or subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts.
You're listening to AI in Action. I'm your host, JP Valentine. Our guest today is Benn Stancil. Benn is the president and founder at Mode. Benn, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Oh, it's our pleasure, Benn. Let's start with yourself. Can you give us your backstory, where you first initially got involved in data and technology, and talk us through your journey?
Sure. So the kind of a three-step process to getting where I was today. In school, I studied math and economics and considered going down the academic economics route for a while. Immediately after school, actually, I worked in DC for a couple years at a think tank doing economic research. And so think tanks are kind of weird institutions. They are basically like consultancies for the government. Where what they do is they provide like a bridge between academia and the policy world, and provide advice on what they think that policymakers should do to address various economic issues or social issues or whatever kind of topics they cover. And so I worked on this for a couple years, and basically what we did was it was very similar to actually what analytics and data science folks do, of looking at a bunch of data, trying to provide recommendations about what policymakers should do about it. And trying to help people make better decisions. The difference, though, obviously, between that and the kind of data world that we think of today is the people who we were advising weren't paying for that advice. We were one of many institutions doing it. It's one thing to tell a PM, here's what you think about the new product they've rolled out. It's another thing to be somebody who's suggesting to Ben Bernanke at the time what the Fed should be doing. And so I thought the work was very interesting, and working on those sorts of data problems was very interesting. But wanted to do it in a way where we were sort of more directly associated with the problems you're trying to solve. So from there, I ended up taking a job at a startup called Yammer, which was acquired by Microsoft in 2012. And then from that job, I met a couple of folks on the data team at Yammer that we all together kind of had the idea for building a product like Mode. And so we left Yammer in 2013 to start Mode, and have been working on that ever since.
Excellent. So talk us through then the series of events that led you to co-found Mode. What was the aha moment that inspired you?
Yeah, for sure. So when we were at Yammer, I was on the analytics team there, and Yammer was one of the earlier companies to think about data the way a lot of folks do today. So Yammer had a fairly large analytics team for companies of its size. I think around the time it got acquired, it was 20 people or so supporting a company of 400 or 450 employees in total. And a lot of it was modeled off of the way that gaming companies have kind of pioneered data-driven growth and product analytics and those kinds of things, of how do we make sense of the way customers are using our product to build better products, but also to reach out to freemium customers and use it as a demand gen and those kinds of things. And so we had built some tools internally to support the team, which was really tools to enable this analytics team to answer the kind of in-depth questions that they needed to answer to solve some of these strategic problems. So a PM would come to us and say, hey, like, do users like this feature? Or if we build this other feature, what do we think the impact will be? How many people are taking these actions? And can we predict what might happen if we build the feature in a different way? And so we had a bunch of these kind of open-ended analytics questions that would answer, and we built tools to support us doing that. And so once we got acquired, at the time, we'd always kind of thought like, hey, these tools are special for us. We have this special set of problems. We got to build our own tools to solve them. Once we got acquired, we started talking to other companies around Silicon Valley and realized that a lot of those companies had built stuff that looked very similar. That LinkedIn and Spotify and Pinterest and Facebook and Airbnb and all these companies built very similar kinds of internal tools to enable their data teams to be able to answer questions quickly and collaboratively with other people around the business. And so from there, we kind of had the idea of, hey, if we're building this and all these other companies are building it, that these leading companies that are doing this, that's probably going to eventually cascade down to the industry more at large and potentially kind of companies outside of tech. somebody should just build a product that helps teams do this. And so that's what we set out to do.
Great, thanks for that, Ben. So look, talk us through the mechanics of launching the company and how you went about building your own team. What's important for you in a tech startup, how you diversify and prioritize equity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on the product itself, I think that we had just come out of this company. We had built a version of this ourselves. I think that we were excited to continue building the thing that we wanted to build internally. And I think this is one of the benefits of building something kind of from a product you've already seen work in some way, that we weren't starting from zero. Internal projects always are sort of 25% resourced, and you have these like visions for the internal tool that you want to build. They're always kind of pipe dreams because you're never really going to get there, and like no company's going to ever invest that much in building an internal tool until you get to something of a huge scale. And so we always had this kind of like roadmap in our head of the types of things we wanted to do. And so in building the product, it was sort of easy to lay out what that roadmap would be because they were the things that we kind of always wanted ourselves, but knew we wouldn't be able to build in an internal tooling. For building the team, I think that's the more important part of this question. The company, Mode or any other company, is going to be as successful as the folks that you hire, and especially the folks that you hire early. And here we were lucky to have come out of this acquisition where not only did that mean we knew a lot of great people, but it was a lot of great people who were starting to think about what they wanted to do next. Those kind of life cycle of Silicon Valley is people work for companies, they have some sorts of exits, and then people start to drift away because they're at those companies, the early stage companies, because they like that environment, and post acquisition things change. So we had like people who were interested in potentially moving on that would reach out to us, and we were able to find some really good people in that way. And so that was where a lot of the early team came from. And I think the last part of that on equity and inclusion, like this is something I'm proud of how Mode has done on this regard. That Mode is always focused on thinking about this and thinking about it from the beginning. And I can't take credit for that. I think that there were some early folks that we hired that really emphasized this, and in a lot of ways preceded the kind of. This has become more mainstream basically over time. I think things like Me Too and stuff like that have made this a much bigger focus in the industry at large. But in 2013, it was still a little bit more nascent for people thinking about this and prioritizing it to the degree that they are today. And so we had some folks, I think, who were really, really forward thinking and had been the kind of like people on the ground fighting for this stuff before it became sort of fashionable to do so. That joined the team early, and I think that's really what I would attribute the success in that regard to. But I think that the lesson in that generally is you have to do this stuff from the beginning. That if we had set out and decided, in 2016 after building a team to 25, 30 people or whatever size it was then, that we wanted to start prioritizing these sort of things, it's very difficult to come back from a team that is 90% white dudes and build something inclusive on top of that. You have to kind of start that from the beginning, and then once you do that, it's much easier to continue to do that once you start that early.
Absolutely, and I think it's probably fair to say that's one of the many things that has made Mode stand out from some competitors in the space when you look at the dynamic and makeup of the group. I want to stay on this topic of Mode comparative to some of the other organizations out there, because we've talked about the team makeup and the origins, but when you look at the impact to the industry, whether it's disruption of data science or just Mode in general, what can you tell us about Mode that will give us some examples of how you guys are different to some of the other organizations trying to offer similar services? Any specific examples?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. So as to the general question of like disruption to data science and BI and kind of the data space, I think we're in the middle of kind of a pretty big transition there, moving away from a lot of like the legacy tools that have been out there to what people kind of in the space have started calling this kind of modern data stack of a kind of new way to think about how companies should be working with their data and the tooling that they should use for it. So we've seen tools like or companies like Snowflake who IPO'd recently and one of the biggest IPOs ever, are very much at the center of that. And there's a lot of other companies out there that are kind of philosophically aligned with building towards a future that is similar to what we want to build. So in that regard, I think there is a fairly broad disruption of data tooling, and something that Mode is part of that, and sort of changing the way that people approach data from being a very BI cube driven type of work to something that is more flexible, something that is often built on top of SQL, something that is built on top of these very large like data lake / data warehouses that are a little bit harder to define, like BigQuery and Snowflake. And so we're moving in that direction generally as a space. I think to the question of how is Mode different from that and from the other tools out there, the thing that has always made Mode, I think, different is we've always been analyst first, basically. The beginnings of Mode, myself and our CEO were both analysts or data scientists, kind of whatever you call it, in prior lives, and so we always approach the market from that perspective. And to us, success is making those folks happy. That a lot of the data companies, especially the BI space, focus a lot on, all right, how do we sell to CIOs? How do we sell to marketers? And then analysts are considered sort of the makers of those products, but they're kind of the afterthought on the actual experience. For us, and I think this is both in the product we want to build, but also the way we see the space evolving, the goal should be to figure out how do you build a product that's really for those analysts and those data scientists. Like, what is it that they want out of that product? How can you make them successful in enabling other people around the company to use data? How can you make them successful in being able to answer like the rich and interesting questions that they actually want to answer in their jobs? And if you can build a great product for that, then you've really found something. And so we've always focused on building that. And so that means to us, it means building an experience that is natural to those people. That if you're an analyst and you start using Mode, we want you to come in and not have to learn the product. We want you to come in and see like, oh, this feels like home to me. I understand how this is going to work. It does the things I want to do. It gets out of my way. It enables me to be better at my job rather than making me figure out a new way to have to do my job.
Excellent. I want to get your take on the journey of startup entrepreneur and, some insight as to what you've learned along the way. I'm sure it's not without its challenges, even as recently as COVID this year, but you've been doing it for 7 years now. Is there any key takeaways that you've learned along the way? Any huge surprises, any rough patches of no? And, when you look at your experience in co-founding and leading a tech startup, what was different, and what advice could you offer to somebody else who's considering embarking on a similar journey?
I mean, certainly ups and downs. 2020 being no exception. I think that you have to be prepared for that. You have to know that this is going to be something where you're going to have bad days and good days, and the bad days are never as bad as you think they are. The good days never really as good as you think they are at the time too. Like there are times when it feels like everything is going to come crashing down, and it often doesn't. And I think, I don't know, one of the things there's a couple things I think that I've come away from realizing, especially in those sort of rough patches, is companies and people are more resilient than it feels like they are. That there are existential moments for startups where you think like this is it, or we're not going to make this, or if this thing doesn't happen, then we're doomed and we're never going to be successful. And startups are pretty resilient. Like companies are able to get through it. People figure out ways, and the people that you work with, if you allow them to come on that journey, I think it's easy as a founder to kind of want to internalize a lot of that stress and protect your team from it. That's not really what people want. They want to come on that journey with you. You can't like unload all of your anxieties on your team every day, but you can't like try to protect them from it either. Like they're there because they want to work for a startup. They want to be in those trenches with you. And leaning on folks like that and enabling them to help work through these problems too, I think goes a long way, not only to actually getting a better result, but also to everybody feels better that way. The people who are, the people of the company feel better because they're really a part of the problem. They feel like they're contributing. They are contributing. And then you as a founder, get the support you need. You're not gonna solve all these things alone. You're not gonna build a company by yourself. And to try to do it all on your own is just going to put you in a really stressful situation. It's going to frustrate the people you work with, and the result of it's not going to be as good either.
Yeah, I think it's good to have that insight. And I look, anytime there's a major economic disruption, it often results in some startups. You look at the last major crash we had and the companies who were born during that time. So no doubt there's people who are looking at this as an opportunity to maybe scratch that itch. But there's a formula and there's a path, and while no two journeys are the same, it's good to learn from individuals like yourself on, you know, what's worked, what you need to look out for, and how to be successful ultimately. Um, Before we wrap up, I want to get your take on data analytics and the trends that you see, because you're so immersed in it. What are the biggest challenges that you as a entrepreneur, a leader of a company working in this industry, that you see your team facing, whether it be on the data analysts or on the data-driven decision-making side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I mean, despite all the stuff I was talking about before of these big transformations in the data stack and the data technology out there, the problems I think that most data analysts face are still relatively mundane. Like if you go on Medium and read about, oh, this is what Facebook is doing, this is what Netflix is doing, here's like the huge scaling problems of how do we provide real-time recommendations at petabyte scale to a billion customers. Like that's what Netflix worries about. That's not what most people are worried about. Most data teams that we talk to are worried about relatively what seems like relatively simple stuff of how do we make sure we're giving the right information to everybody around the business. How do we as a data team make sure we're not spending all of our time building dashboards, but we're also thinking about like the strategic problems that we want to solve, that we're also thinking about, how can we be proactive in the way we're serving our teams, and help everybody make better decisions in that way, rather than just being folks who are building reports and dashboards. And I think a lot of that comes from that we're still seeing some like the data stack coalescing and like data coming from a bunch of different places. People are not really sure how to best serve other stakeholders. All that tooling needs to converge into a place where it's a little bit more like everything is sort of set up by default, and then we can all work on these things together. And so still, I think the biggest problems people have are these kind of like mundane problems of figuring out, we got to do reporting, we got to do data science in the sense of like answering more strategic questions, not necessarily the like capital in machine learning type of questions. How do we do all of that in a relatively, a company that has a bunch of other problems to solve and things like that? And so, that's really what we see from most folks is the things that you would think would be the simple problems that often end up being the hardest ones. Like that's kind of a funny example. One of the hardest questions that you could ever ask any data team that we talk to is, how much money does your company make? And it's the amount of effort that people have to put into just figuring that out is still enormous. And so, we want to try to help people make sure that they can answer those questions really quickly as well, and not just do the stuff that's kind of at the very end of the spectrum of how complex and advanced things can get.
Thanks for that, Ben. I wanna bring it back around to Mode as a business. 7 years now you've been doing this. Through all the challenges that most startups face, and you've come out and continued to grow and be successful. I want to get your take on looking ahead. The years to come. What do you expect for the business? What are you most excited about? And what have you loved about your work with Mode thus far?
Mm-hmm. So there's two ways I would answer that. The first way is the sort of like business side of that question, which is the industry there's a lot of space for the industry to go. That this is a really, really big change from the migration from everybody doing their data work and tools that are Oracle and Teradata and all those kinds of things into this more modern stack. And not just as it kind of a replacement of some of these old legacy tools with more modern ways of doing it, but it's people are reinventing new ways to make use of data and figuring out how to take advantage of all this data that we've been collecting for so long. And that's still in the relatively early stages. And so, I am excited for Mode as a business because we're still at the beginning of this really, really big wave. And Mode is very much in the middle of that. When we see companies like Snowflake IPO for as much as they did, that's a sign that there's a real opportunity here for this being a giant transformative shift in how companies think about data and what companies are willing to do with data and all those sorts of things. And so I think, for one, we're excited about just being a part of this big transition and being a part of something that could be so transformative to how companies work, not just how they use data, but how they think about solving problems and all those sorts of things. At a sort of smaller scale, I think that there's also just building the team, continuing to build on the team that we have, is one of the things that I get most excited about. It's seeing people grow. It's once you've been doing this for a while, those are the moments I think that are really the ones that make it worth it. Is seeing people who come in who are just new to either working or just getting exposure to data for the first time and want to learn more about it. There's somebody on the team, for instance, who was doing some work recently, who came in to do some sales work, started learning more about analytics because of this, the space we sell into. Learned SQL, learned to do some analysis, started building out stuff, and now is thinking about taking that more in the direction they want to take their career. And so I think being a part of that is also really exciting to me, of having more and more opportunities to have people come on board, being able to learn those things and seeing how Mode can be supportive of their careers. When we hire people, it's not just about what can Mode get from them, but how do we make sure that when they leave Mode, whenever that is, they're proud that it was part of their journey.
Excellent. And I think that's a great way to finish on the final question. Can you give us some insight into the types of positions, the types of people that you're going to need to bring in order to continue on this exciting wave of growth? What future career opportunities are there going to be for people who are potentially listening?
Yeah, so hiring folks across the board. So from sales and marketing and engineering and product and data science. I think that the places where I would particularly highlight is across all of those things. We have a particular interest in folks who are data oriented. That sales folks who have a background in data. We have some folks actually on the sales team who used to be analysts who realized they really like thinking that way, but they wanted to be more customer facing, or they wanted something that was more, out talking to people and things like that, that have joined. Or we have customer success managers doing the same who used to be analysts, but really liked the customer interaction, really liked talking to people and helping solve problems. And so now they're joining our customer success or solutions teams. And similarly on the engineering side, we build a web application. The typical types of folks that you'd want to build web applications are the types of folks we're hiring, but that comes with a particular focus on data technologies. So, for instance, we're hiring data visualization specialists. If you're someone who's steeped in understanding the data technologies like the D3s and the Vegas and those sorts of things, or really loves learning more about things like grammar of graphics and implementing systems that rely on that kind of way of thinking. That's exactly the kind of stuff that we're also excited about, is people who have that kind of background, are engineers and can build products, but really are excited about solving these data problems. Across the board, there's always space at Mode for folks who think that way, kind of regardless of the way that the sort of job title they have, whether or not that's a salesperson or a finance manager or a product manager. If you're someone who's excited about working with data, then we're excited to talk to you.
I love it. Ben, listen, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us today. I appreciate you giving us the background behind Mode, talking us through the journey from startup to where you're at now, and the impact you're having. I think it's very impressive, the environment and the culture, and how you championed diversity and inclusion from day one, and that shows with the structure of your team at all levels. And really exciting times ahead for you, and we're looking forward to seeing what you can accomplish. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
AI in Action is brought to you by Alldus International, covering your business's staffing, consulting, and networking needs. Alldus offer an exec search program. Alldus can help you discover how data science and AI can transform your company. With our unrivaled network of C-suite executives and senior AI professionals, we offer retained search services across the US and Europe. For more information, contact mark@alldus.com. Get the Alldus advantage. Become a member of the Alldus community and enjoy some of the following: AI meetups. Once a month, our community gathers to listen to some of the leading experts in the world of data science and AI. Our speakers come from all over the world, including Dublin, Boston, and Frankfurt. We also have our AI mentors. Our experts will provide mentoring to Alldus members. And don't forget our AI in Action podcast. Each week we have guests from all over the world talking us through their education, career and more. Become an Alldus member and get the Alldus advantage. For more information and to sign up for our newsletter, log on to www.alldus.com. That's www.alldus.com. Alldus International, empowering through AI.